Should be.
Okay. Well, I want to welcome everyone to this evening's ground school session. And tonight is a class I always look forward to. And I'm looking forward to it even more tonight because our guest instructor, Pete Arsvold, who will tell you a little bit more about himself here in a moment, always has a very interesting and interactive hands-on lesson. And I'm going to be very interested to see how this translates to a Zoom and YouTube format. But I have no doubt that it will be really quite interesting. It always is. Pete has great insights and always has very interesting ideas, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy this class. So without any further delay, Pete, I'm happy to have you here tonight, and I will now hand you off.
Good evening, everyone. Scott, if you can hear me, raise your hand. You can hear me. Very good. So this is my first Zoom presentation telecast, and happy to assist. Hope you are all sheltered in place and well. Soon this virus will be behind us. We can resume ordinary flight training. All should be well. The one thing I didn't say in my presentation is that I've been flying for years and years and love to fly. I'm a banker by day and a pilot by night. If I had a choice, I would. If I had a choice, I would be a pilot day and night, except it doesn't pay the rent. My regular day job is a banker, and that helps to pay the rent. So without further ado, I say we get started. You'll see the presentation is less than 3 hours, unless we open it up for questions, and we will. Feel free to ask as many questions as you can. Look forward to answering those questions. Scott, back to you.
Okay. Well, hold on.
I think we can go ahead and start the video if you guys are ready.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead and take it from there.
Breezy.
All right, sounds good. Yeah.
Before you go there, I think everyone behind the scenes understands that Breezy and Travis have been instrumental in providing the technology to make this happen. I'm so grateful for your efforts and so appreciative. I hope the rest of the class realizes the effort you've extended to make this happen. Thank you very much.
We're more than happy to.
Good evening, Morey ground students. My name is Pete Arsvold, and welcome to ground school via the live stream, ground school via COVID-19. Glad to have you here. This is my first time, and it is, I must say, a very quiet classroom. Before we're done, I intend to show you my email address. I encourage you to send me any questions that you might have regarding tonight's presentation. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm so pleased that you're here and participating in this effort which is intended to generally increase your knowledge base and to make you a better pilot. Tonight we're talking about V-speeds. As you maybe noticed on the chart to my immediate left, V-speeds are unique to every aircraft you fly. A 172 has certain V-speeds. A 152, certain other V-speeds. It is important for you as a pilot to know the V-speeds of the aircraft you are in, the aircraft you fly. In fact, I recommend that you create a little index card for every aircraft. This is the V speeds for 172. These are the V speeds for 152 and so on. That way you have these numbers handy and close by. You will find these V speeds in the POH. And the POH is put together by engineers. I sometimes wonder if they were pilots, because these speeds can be difficult to find in the POH. In fact, if we had a POH here tonight, I suggest that you would be hard-pressed to find these V speeds in your POH in less than 5 minutes in total. Some of you might take 10. And when you're in the aircraft and you've got to fly these speeds to do the right thing, it's important not to be needing to look in your POH. That's why an index card is perfect. Put it in your shirt pocket, know the speeds that are important to fly, and you will be a better pilot. First V speed, VY. These speeds that we're talking about tonight are in a 172 at gross weight, 2,300 pounds. If your weight is less than gross weight, these V speeds will change. They don't tell you in the POH how much they will change, but I can tell you they do change. When asked by your instructor or when asked by an examiner, what is the V speed? These are the numbers they're looking for. And again, since you have them on your index card, you'll have all the answers. VY is your best climb rate, 73. And the key word there is rate. It will get you to 5,000 feet in the shortest possible time. Best rate. That compares to VX, which is your best angle. Angle gets you the highest altitude in a designated or determined distance. All right, so if flying on a short field with a barn at the end of the runway, your speed to fly, making it most likely that you get over the barn at the end of the runway. Your speed to fly would be best climb angle 59. And when you practice 59, you'll notice the nose of the aircraft has a significant up angle. That up angle results in a speed of 59 using full power. And by flying VX, you have the highest likelihood of making it over the barn at the end of a short runway. If your engine should stop for any reason, the speed next is VG. Now I call it VG. You won't find VG in your POH. You will find your best glide speed. Since this is best rate, this is best angle, I call this best glide. 172 without flaps, best glide 65. The reason best glide is important is because it will give you the furthest distance without the engine running on the aircraft you fly. And so imagine you're at 5,000 feet, the engine stops running for who knows why. Usually the reason it stops running for me is that I reach down and I pull that throttle cable towards me to idle. I say to the student, gosh, your engine just stopped running. What are you going to do next? What I want them to say is I'm going to fly best glide 65 and look for a perfect spot to land. By flying 65, it increases their likelihood they would find that best place to land. You'll see I've asterisked these three speeds. For me, they're the most important three speeds. Now, I mean, I agree these are important as well, but these are the three you use most often. And for that reason, I asterisk these three. Let's talk about the rest. We have VSO, and that's stall with flaps. When landing a short field, you want to fly with flaps. You don't want to fly 41, it's too slow. But know that your stall speed is a lower speed with flaps extended. 41 is the stall speed, flaps extended and landing gear extended. VSO, how you might remember that is stuff out, like flaps extended, landing gear out, stall dirty, stall stuff out, VSO. In the event of a crosswind, you want to use as few flaps as possible. That creates a stall clean, or VS1. You'll see that's 47 in a Skyhawk. If you need to fly slowly, VSO is better than VS1 by 6 knots. And 6 knots isn't a significant number, but it is more than 10% better. Flaps out versus clean. These are technical speeds to fly. As you fly with your instructor, it's unlikely that you'd be flying speeds as low as this, except if you're practicing stalls. Keep in mind, this is a test question for you. When practicing stalls, you need to be 1,500 feet or higher when you recover from the stall. That's an FAA regulation. You'll find it in the FAR AIM book. And so we practice stalls with altitude to spare. And you'll figure this out when you fly, but when you stall the aircraft, the most direct way to recover is to lower the nose. And when you're 1,500 feet or higher, 5 football fields or higher, you have more than enough altitude to lower the nose and recover from the stall completely without concern. Stalling close to the ground, 100, 200, 300 feet, should absolutely be avoided, as a stall close to the ground may make recovery difficult, if not impossible. Stalls are not a dangerous thing. I encourage you to work with your instructor so you're very comfortable, very familiar with stalls, stall recognition, stall recovery. Next speed on the list, VNE, the never exceed speed. The aircraft you're flying is designed to fly, a certain speed. It's been tested. It's been tested at 120, 130, 140. Above red line, VNE, Cessna didn't test the aircraft. No one knows for sure what's going to happen above 160. I think the POH might say 159, but I rounded off, 160. Above 160, you become an uncompensated test pilot, and you're not being paid to be an uncompensated test pilot. So because parts of the aircraft might separate above 160, and because you may need those parts to land safely, please do not ever fly faster than VNE. Never exceed. Don't fly that fast. It's quite difficult to get there, in fact. The nose needs to be low, typically need full power. If you ever find yourself in that situation, by all means, reduce power and do your best to bring the nose to a level attitude, gently, to avoid overstressing the aircraft. Better yet, don't ever fly this fast. No need to. The last of our speeds to cover, VA, maneuvering speed. These 4 speeds, you'll find on your airspeed indicator. This speed is not found on your airspeed indicator. And V and E also found on your airspeed indicator. VA is found in the POH, Pilot Operating Handbook, and it's the speed at which or less, at which or lower, that you can move the flight controls to full deflection. You can just be cruising along 97 or less, and you can move the controls all the way. You can push forward all the way, pull back all the way. And the aircraft will respond in an alarming-like manner, but you won't bend any sheet metal. VA or less, you won't bend any sheet metal. However, I caution you, because your passenger will maybe never fly with you again. They're not accustomed to having the elevator be pulled all the way back in just a split second, or all the way forward in just a split second. Don't do this with passengers on board, and really don't do it anytime, really, except if absolutely necessary. Know that 97 or less, you won't bend any sheet metal. That's not always a good reason to fly 97 or less, but know that no sheet metal will be bent. By the way, if you're flying very turbulent conditions, maybe too close to a thunderstorm, or maybe a day when there's wind shear, and you're getting bounced around in the cockpit, keep in mind that every bounce creates stress on the airframe. That stress can exceed the strength of the airframe. Remember, there's a speed you can fly at or less, and the airframe will not suffer injury. What would that speed be? Well, coincidentally, that would be maneuvering speed. So if ever you're in very turbulent conditions, tighten your seatbelt, fly 97 or less, and you're gonna be in for a ride, but no sheet metal will be bent. The aircraft will arrive at your destination airport. Everything will still be straight. No bending of sheet metal. So those are our V speeds. I always like to ask questions of the class. I'm going to ask you one now. You're at your uncle's farm field. You're flying an aircraft of your own. And it happens there's a barn at the end of the runway. Wanting to make it over the barn, what speed would you fly? Your answers were very quiet, but I'm certain that many of you, perhaps all of you, answered the right question. Over the barn, VX 59 gives you the highest likelihood that you're going to make it over that barn. All right, now you're in turbulent conditions. You tighten your seatbelt, you're getting bounced all around. You're concerned that the sheet metal might be bent. What speed would you fly? Correct. You'd fly VA or less. VA or less. And you won't have any bent sheet metal. Now, you and a buddy, you have a bet. The bet is, and you're flying matched aircraft, same engine, same aircraft, same weight. The bet is who can get to 5,000 feet in the least amount of time. Least amount of time. What speed would you fly to win that contest? Correct. You would fly your best climb rate, 73, because that's the rate that gets you to the highest altitude in the least amount of time. So that concludes our discussion regarding V-speeds. I look forward to answering any questions that you might have. Stay tuned, more to follow.
Does VX and VY make sense to everyone? I know that's something that I got confused on quite a bit. That was actually one of the 4 questions that I got wrong in my written exam that I'm still very, very sour about. I know we have a couple people on the YouTube stream right now, so if you guys have questions there, as always, feel free to type them out in the chat and I can go ahead and read them out loud.
Reese, regarding the question that you missed on the written test, do you recall the question and do you recall the answer you gave and the answer you should have given?
I don't recall the exact question, but it was something along the lines of the example that you gave where you were trying to achieve, I believe it was the best rate of climb, and I could not keep straight VX versus VY. And of course, I had answered the incorrect one after I changed my initial guess and changed it from the right answer to the wrong one.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it when that happens. The
Yeah.
one way I keep X and Y in together is that X has more angles than Y. So I think of best angle VX because it has more angles than Y. And, you know, if you took a protractor and measured the angle needed to get over the barn, that would be best angle, or 59. Best rate then is that contest. You're challenging a co-pilot, a friend, you're challenging the first person to get to 5,000 feet. That's best rate. It doesn't have to do with angles. It doesn't have to do with that protractor. It doesn't have anything to do with the barn at all. So that's rate. And, you know, it's how I keep it straight, rate versus angle. Maybe that can help you. I like what I see on the screen. It's perfect. Notice that X is a matter of distance. Y is a matter of time. That's a great graphic.
Does anyone have any other questions? That is a good graphic and a good one to really look at and make sure you understand. I don't see any questions on the YouTube stream, so, and we're answering one right now on the Zoom chat, asking about descending V-speeds, if there are any speeds for that. And I would say that the only one that I can think of would be best glide, in which you're looking at how far you can go given a certain speed that you're going. Your best glide gets you the longest distance compared to other speeds. But as far as like equivalent VX and VY speeds for descending, I don't believe there are any, and Sarah answered the same. So that was a good question. But yep, let's go ahead and start the next portion of the video.
Breezy, before you go there,
Sure.
I thought of two V speeds for descending. One would be VFE. That would be your maximum speed for flap extension. And typically as you descend, that's when you'll be extending flaps. So VFE would be a descending V speed. And one more, and this would be V gear extended. When you fly a retractable gear aircraft, there's a speed above which you're not supposed to extend the landing gear. Apparently, it doesn't descend and lock in place. I don't think it's a matter of damaging the gear, but more having it be down and locked. So when you're above that maximum gear extension speed, you want to keep the gear uptight and clean. As you slow below your gear extension speed, then you're safe to extend, and you'll get the 3 green lights for down and locked. Since we don't fly retractable gear aircraft too often, that gear extension speed is one that you'll find in a POH, but you won't find it in a Cessna 172 POH.
That's a good point.
Wow, that's a lot of V speeds.
Obviously, not all of these are going to be found in something like our Cessna POH, but I don't even recognize many of these. But yeah, that was a great question. And but yeah, Joe, good job for answering that, or for asking that. All right, now I think we're ready for the next portion.
Welcome back. Next session, we're talking about the wing, how the wing impacts performance. It's a session I call The Wing is the Thing. You say, well, yeah, I guess it's the thing, but why is that important? Well, the wing is the thing. The wing is the thing that separates a mouse from a sparrow. They're both about the same size, but the wing enables that sparrow to defy gravity. The wing is the thing. It's the wing that enables an Airbus 320 to fly. Without the wing, you simply have a ground means of transportation. We as pilots appreciate the value a wing brings to the equation. The wing is a thing. Let's talk about it and how it works. Bernoulli believed that, or discovered that, fast-moving molecules create low pressure. And I believe in what he said. A wing generally will have an airfoil shape. The top wing will be a broader and longer span than the bottom of the wing. And that's called an airfoil. Because molecules like to stay together, as the airfoil passes through the air, the molecules on top end up running faster, flowing faster, moving faster than the molecules on the bottom. These molecules are faster moving. Faster moving molecules create low pressure. And you maybe notice this at home. You have a vacuum there, I expect. Fast moving molecules creates low pressure. Dirt moves towards the vacuum because of low pressure. The wing moves towards low pressure for the very same reason. Fast moving molecules, low pressure. Another scientist, he believed, famous guy named Newton believed that each action has opposite and equal reaction. So as the air bumps off the bottom of the wing and heads downward, it forces the wing upward. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That's Newton's third law of motion. If asked, who do I believe, Bernoulli or Newton, I would say I believe them both. I can't deny that objects move towards low pressure. And I can't deny that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I'll let you decide who you believe. And it is okay to believe both. So the key here is that the air moving over the top needs to stay attached to the wing. If the air becomes unattached, lift goes away. It's a pretty simple concept. Oh, and let's talk about it a bit more. When the lift goes away, the wing will stall. And on the next page I have a definition of what is a stall. So this definition, I want you to write it down, I want you to remember it. And when asked by an examiner, or by your instructor, or by your spouse, what causes a wing to stall? I want you to give them a very definite answer. A stall occurs anytime the relative wind exceeds the wing's critical angle of attack, without regard to airspeed, without regard to attitude. That's a very important answer. They can occur at any attitude, they can occur at any airspeed. What causes them to occur? Exactly this. The air which was flowing smoothly over the top of the wing isn't flowing smoothly anymore. It spins off, as you see in the red. When the air separates from the top surface of the wing, the molecules, as I discussed before, they're not racing against each other any longer. These guys are going off on a pathway of their own. Lift is lost. Simple as that. Lift is lost. A stall occurs. Now don't panic. A stall isn't a dangerous thing. The most simple way to recover from a stall is simply lower the nose. By lowering the nose, suddenly the airflow connects again to the wing, and instantly lift is generated once again. Lift is important. Again, lift is what separates an airplane from an automobile. It's the wings, it's the lift caused by the wings. So, you might ask, well, when does the air separate? This will vary from airplane to airplane, but in a Cessna 172, the air separates anytime the angle of relative wind exceeds 18 degrees compared to the chord line. I happen to have a wing with me today, actually a wing rib. This wing rib came to me as part of a Pete and Pole builder's kit. Bernard Pete and Pole, years ago, wanted to fly, and he grew up in Spring Valley, Minnesota. He was a farmer without a high school education. He designed this shape. It's a beautiful airfoil shape. You'll see that's round on top, generally flat on the bottom. Molecules flow faster on top, not as fast on the bottom. Low pressure is generated, and up we go. Keep in mind, in the 1930s, this wing design was invented by Bernard Pete and Pole. Aerodynamic experts from NASA, from MIT, from Harvard, they've tried to devise, design, develop a wing better than this. They haven't been able to. Bernard Pete and Pole, using the French curve in a building near the barn, developed this wing. It's an amazing wing. Designer after designers tried to make a better wing without success. The white line here is the chord line. The red line is the critical angle of attack. The yellow line is the relative wind. As long as the relative wind does not exceed the angle of the critical angle, lift continues to be generated. But if the relative wind would be greater than the critical angle of attack, the air separates from the wing, lift is lost, and the aircraft will descend naturally, automatically. It will lower the nose. As a pilot then, you need to let the nose be lower, allowing those air molecules to reattach to the wing. Life is good. The aircraft are designed in such a way that they will recover from a stall on their own if you let them. You'll notice that the angle between the chord line and the critical angle of attack, it's thin. It's a thin angle. That angle is approximately 15 degrees. 15 degrees is a small slice. As long as you respect this slice, you'll do fine. The wing won't stall. But if you exceed the slice, and again, as a reminder, the slice is the difference between the chord line angle and the critical angle of attack. You'll find in aviation magazines and periodicals, you'll find angle of attack indicators. A larger aircraft like an Airbus 747, they have angle of attack indicators. They tell you where you are from an angle of attack perspective. The Cessnas we fly do not have an angle of attack indicator, but you will know that you're getting near a stall because of a stall buffet, where the aircraft trembles or buffets slightly. You'll know that you're getting close to a stall because the control surfaces of the aircraft will be less effective. Sometimes people say, the controls are mushy. So if you ever have mushy controls, know that there's a potential for the aircraft to stall. Simple recovery, simply lower the nose. Life is good. But you notice I said lower the nose. It's important that you practice stalling an aircraft with altitude to spare. The FAA requires that prior to any stall, you be at least 1,500 feet above ground, 5 football fields high. That altitude is your friend. And as you recover from a stall, you need to lower the nose. And you're 1,500 feet above ground, there's no issues lowering the nose. It is important not to stall when close to the ground by accident. You can on purpose, but not recommended when close to the ground. Because remember, the way to recover from a stall is to lower the nose. If you are already close to the ground, lowering the nose can result in jeopardy. That's why we practice stalls at altitude. Again, the FAA minimum altitude for stall recovery practice, 1,500 feet. You'll find that test question in your written exam, and your flight examiner, called a designated pilot examiner, will probably ask you that question as well. So here we have issues about Bernoulli and Newton and what causes a wing to stall. So because you maybe didn't write it down when I gave it to you the first time, let me ask you again, what causes a wing to stall? Ah yes, you nailed it. A wing will stall anytime the relative wind angle exceeds the wing's critical angle of attack without regard to attitude or airspeed. And that's an important consideration. People think, well, I've got a whole bunch of airspeed, I'm not going to stall. But in fact, you can. If you pull back and the angle of relative wind exceeds the wing's critical angle, you will stall every time. There's no way to stop it. It's about the relative wind in comparison to the chord line. Now, here's an important thing. You're flying along. If you pull back more than 18 degrees, if you pull back more than the critical angle, the wing will stall. Guarantee it. It will stall. Now we're going straight down. You can do this. Not recommended. Don't do it with family or friends. Probably don't do it with your instructor either, but it can be done. To recover, you need to bring the aircraft back to level. No surprise. But you need to pull back less than 18 degrees. Because if you pull back more than 18, the wing will stall. The air will separate. And so when going straight down, it is important to pull back, but you have to be measured in the amount you pull. You want to pull less than 18 degrees. All right, so even though going straight down, the wing can still stall. Don't be surprised, it still can. Now, imagine that we're going straight up. Can the wing stall? Let me ask you, can the wing stall going straight up? The answer is yes. It can stall if you pull back more than the critical angle of attack. The wing will stall every single time. One important consideration, we talk about the relative wind. In an ordinary normal flight, that relative wind is 3 degrees. And you fly along happy as a clam. Or maybe I should say, happy as a sparrow. If you exceed 18 degrees, the wing stalls every single time. But the relative wind isn't relative to the horizon. It's relative to the chord line. And this is important, very important. The relative wind is indicated by the yellow bar. Notice that even when we're going down, the relative wind is still in relation to the chord line. Even if upside down, the relative wind is in relation to the chord line. So even going straight up, the relative wind is a relationship to the chord line. And this is an important consideration. It's not relative to the ground. It's not relative to the horizon. The wind is relative to the chord line. Very important. So if the relative wind exceeds the critical angle, what happens? The wing will stall every single time. How do you recover? You lower the nose. The relative wind more approximates the chord line, stall goes away. I wish you were here to ask questions. I encourage you to ask questions. In a prior slide, I did put up my email address and phone number. By all means, call me. I'd love to talk about this. As a private pilot, I didn't fully understand this. As an instructor, beginning early on, I didn't fully understand this. But I do understand it now. I know it well. I'll be happy to share it with you at any time. Thanks, and I'll be back with additional information very soon.
So we did have one question here from Ben on the YouTube chat. Does that mean that you can practice stalls starting at 1,500 feet, or should you be much higher such that recovery altitude is still at or above 1,500 feet? Pete, do you want to take that one?
Certainly. Good question, and thank you for asking. The FAA requirements is that the maneuver be complete. And when complete, you have 1,500 feet above ground as a minimum. So if you were to lose 200 feet in a stall practice, you need to start at 1,700 feet AGL or higher. Again, when the maneuver is complete, that's when the FAA will look at your minimum altitude, and by regulation, that minimum altitude, 1,500 feet above ground. And that's an important consideration too. Above ground or above sea level, because ground elevation can change throughout the US, even can change between Morey Field and Madison. I think Madison's 856 above sea level, Morey's 924 maybe above sea level. The FAA doesn't care where you are relationship to sea level. They care, and you care from a safety perspective. Altitude above ground, not less than 1,500 feet.
Are there any other, excuse me, are there any other questions? I tried to talk too quick there. Not seeing any other ones, so unless you have something to add. Oh, here we go. How much altitude is typically lost in a stall?
Good question. Good question. If you're doing a departure stall where the engine's running full power, imagine that you would start at 2,000 feet above ground. As you climb during the departure, then the wing breaks, the angle of relative wind exceeds the chord line, critical angle of attack. You'll lose altitude, but typically your recovery will be above 2,000 feet. So on a departure stall, you actually can gain altitude during your stall maneuver. On an approach to landing stall, it's a requirement that you first descend before you initiate the stall. So imagine that you were at 2,000 feet above ground. You're descending as though you were landing. Then you stall. It's possible that the distance lost could be 300 feet, perhaps 400 feet. And so depending on the nature of the stall that you're practicing, it could be from a gain in altitude above ground for departure stalls or a loss of altitude for arrival stalls. I know I read in POH for Citabria, which is a tailwheel aircraft with a 160 horsepower engine. The POH there said the usual stall recovery result in loss of altitude approximately 200 feet. As you do the stalls for your instructor and for your designated pilot examiner, one of the requirements in a stall recovery is minimal loss of altitude. So I know when I train with students, they might lose 500 feet on a arrival stall, and I'll coach them and counsel them and work with them to limit the loss of altitude to a number closer to 200 feet. And so if you're very good at it, maybe 200 feet loss of altitude when you do an approach to landing stall. But as you learn the stall practice, as you have your first practice, that number could be higher, maybe as high as 500 feet. You don't want to lose 500 feet on your exam because again, the airman certification standards suggest the minimum loss of altitude. And from a practical sense, the minimum loss of altitude is important. Some pilots will stall in the traffic pattern at the airport, and not recommended, but the traffic pattern is 1,000 feet above ground. And when you turn base to final, you're only 500 feet above the ground. So you can see why a minimum loss of altitude is important. As you turn final, considering that you're only 500 feet above ground, you could get by with a 200-foot loss of altitude, but much more than that, and you'd be at the treetops. Of course, being at the treetops, not recommended. Good question, though, I must say, great question.
And I don't see any other questions coming through, so I think we can go ahead and start the next portion.
Good evening and welcome back. Next topic to be discussed is how being nose heavy or tail heavy impacts your flight performance. It's important to know this as a pilot, but also important to know this when asked by your examiner or asked by your spouse. Why is being tail heavy less favorable than being nose heavy? It's important for you to understand these concepts. I entitled this portion of the presentation, Aerodynamic Chart of Knowledge. That sounds kind of boring, but I'll try to make it interesting for you. Know that an aircraft performs better when the aircraft is light, and the performance diminishes as the aircraft is heavy. Flying by yourself, your airspeed will be faster, your climb performance better than if you have your family on board. Flying by yourself, the aircraft performance will be better than if I'm flying with you. And this often happens when a student pilot goes solo for the very first time. He'll say, Pete, when you got out of the airplane, the performance had a dramatic increase. And I'm saying, thank you very much, because lightweight flies better. And I'm not lightweight, so you throw me on board with you, the aircraft performance diminishes. It's still adequate. I mean, after all, at Morey we have a 4,000-foot runway. It's more than adequate, but understand that as aircraft weight increases, performance decreases. All right, So here's an important concept. When you're flying level flight by yourself, just a little up is enough to fly safely. But if I'm on board, or your family's on board, you're going to need more up elevator to maintain level flight. All right, and this is an important concept, and I think you understand it already. But remember when I said the wing is the thing? It's the angle of attack that changes your lift. The tail does not lift an airplane. The wing does all the work. The tail tells the nose of the aircraft where to go. Because the wing is attached to the nose and the tail through the fuselage, the wing is the thing. All right, so imagine that you're heavy, nose heavy. The aircraft will naturally want to descend, but you don't want it to descend. You want straight and level. All right, so here's what you do. You add a little up elevator. Adding elevator pushes the tail downward, making the aircraft aerodynamically heavier than it was at rest. Because it's heavier, performance will be reduced. All right, so that's the concept. In the event that you were tail heavy, to fly level, you would need to push up on the elevator. That would enable the wing to fly level, and the aircraft would be aerodynamically lighter than before. So about aerodynamics. If you bank an aircraft 60 degrees and maintain altitude, you have this horizontal component of lift. And the aircraft weighs twice a normal ramp weight aircraft. So interesting, here the aircraft is 2,300 pounds at gross weight. When we go here, if we don't lose altitude, the aerodynamic weight of the aircraft is 4,600 pounds. That's a pretty significant increase, but that's what I mean by static weight and aerodynamic weight. Now, of course, this could cause questions, and by all means, send an email and call me. I'd be happy to explain it. But here's the deal. If we're nose heavy, we're going to have to use up elevator. The aircraft is going to be heavier, aerodynamically speaking. How does heavier impact your cruise speed? Remember how I said if you're by yourself, you're going to go faster? With me on board, you're going to go slower. Heavier results in a slower cruise speed. A heavy airplane flies more slowly. If you were tail heavy, now you're lifting the tail, you're aerodynamically weighed less, aerodynamically, you're going to fly faster. Tail heavy aircraft, same weight, ramp weight, will fly faster than a nose heavy aircraft every single time. So the question is, how does being nose heavy and tail heavy impact your stall speed? Remember what we talked about. A light aircraft has a slower stall speed. A heavy aircraft has a higher or faster stall speed. So here we are nose heavy, where you need to raise the nose by adding weight, creating a heavier aerodynamic aircraft. Heavier, the stall speed is faster. And no surprise, a lighter aircraft has a slower stall speed. Okay, so hope you're following with me. If you were here in person, you'd be asking me questions right about now. By all means, send them to me by email or by phone. So the question is, a tail-heavy airplane flies faster, and a tail-heavy airplane has a safer stall speed. So you have to ask yourself, why doesn't everyone fly tail-heavy? It's a matter of safety. It's a matter of stability. A tail-heavy aircraft has less stability. A nose-heavy aircraft, it's nose-heavy, right? So you're pushing down on the elevator to maintain a level flight. It's heavier. A heavier aircraft has more stability. That's why we don't fly tail-heavy, is because we like stability. Stability is our friend. Instability, not our friend. And so if you do the weight and balance for a 172 or 152, what would you guess? Is it typically more heavy? Pardon me, is it typically more nose heavy? Or is a training aircraft typically more tail heavy? All right, it's a trainer. We like stability. I think when you do the math, you're going to find that the trainer you fly with you alone or with me on board will typically be nose heavy. Now, our cruise speed will be slower and our stall speed will be higher, but it's stable, it's friendly. We don't have goofy things going on. Stability is a good thing when you're a student pilot. By the way, when you're an airshow performer, they forget about stability, but they want performance. They want maneuverability. They want quick reaction. And most aerobatic aircraft, they will fly tail heavy because it gives them a lot of maneuverability and because they're not students. As students and as instructors, we like stability, therefore we tend to fly a little bit nose heavy. And that concludes my discussion regarding, is nose heavy better or is tail heavy better and why? And I think in summary, in recap, remember that an aircraft flies better when it's light. A light aircraft has a slower stall speed. A light aircraft flies faster. But if you are tail heavy, you lose stability, and stability is a good thing. More to follow.
How's everyone doing? Did all of that make sense so far?
Hopefully you've gained enough knowledge that you know the right questions to ask. And you'll have opportunity to ask questions both tonight and with your instructor. And Rich Morey's always hanging around, Sarah's around, George, Scott, you know, we're all around to answer your questions, quite honestly, day or night. I particularly like getting questions via email because if I don't have an answer, I can look it up. And then when I do provide you an answer, I look really smart. So anyway, the key is to ask questions because, you know, learning to fly is not an easy thing to accomplish. Only a very small percentage of human beings are pilots. And The reason is because it is difficult. It takes commitment, it takes focus, it takes perspective, it takes resources. And on all of that, there's really nothing greater, in my opinion, there's nothing greater than being a pilot. It gives you freedom that your friends and relatives only dream of. It gives you opportunity that, you know, your friends and relatives only dream of. And, you know, it's very worthwhile pursuit. And when you have that pilot certificate in your wallet, in your purse, it stays there for life. You know, it's rare to get something when you're young that you hang on to the whole rest of your life. So those of you that are in class this evening, and those of you who are pursuing a pilot's license, you know, kudos, congrats. It's very worthwhile, very rewarding too, I might say.
I would definitely have to agree. It's a bizarre feeling after even taking lessons and doing a whole bunch of pattern work. The first time that you leave the pattern, that's still one of my favorite flight lessons ever. First time I went over to SOC, it's like, whoa, we're actually taking the airplane and we're flying from one place to another. And I know how long it takes to drive over to SOC City. That was cool. And then the first time that you take it on a little bit of a longer cross country and things like that, it's a fun time. I don't see any questions coming in on either of the chats, so I think we can go ahead and start. Unless you had anything else to add there, Pete.
Not at this time. Let's move forward.
Welcome back, and the evening continues. Thank you very much for your attention. I would say we're about at the halfway point, maybe a little beyond. So again, I appreciate your attention. I hope that you're taking breaks between these small segments. As you learn to fly, and even as a regular, experienced pilot, your instructor will say to you, more right rudder. These are perhaps the most commonly spoken 3 words that occur in a cockpit during flight training and even after flight training. More right rudder. Aircraft just have this tendency to go to the left. Right rudder makes that problem go away. And you'll know that you're moving to the left because your turn coordinator will have this ball on the right-hand side. When you see the ball on the right-hand side, you should step on the ball using right rudder. When you step right rudder, the ball comes to the center. You want the ball in the center. This is the ball in the center. This prompts your instructor to say more right rudder. As you add rudder, the aircraft comes back and flies in a straight line. Straight line is good. Flying sideways is bad. So more right rudder. Don't be surprised if you hear your instructor say more right rudder. It's very common, very common. And here's why an airplane wants to go to the left. P factor. Why do airplanes want to go left? Because of P factor. P factor is caused by the prop. Perhaps that's why it's called P factor. Keep in mind, when we talked before about the wing is the thing, we talked about increasing angle of attack resulting in increasing lift. The propeller, if you look carefully, it has an airfoil shape, much like a wing. Round on the top, flat on the bottom. As this cars through molecules of air, it generates lift. when the aircraft is level, parked outside, for example, there is no P factor. But when you take off and the nose of the aircraft rises, this blade has increased lift. The left side blade, reduced lift. All right, so as we rotate the airplane from a cockpit perspective, remember this blade increased lift, this blade decreased lift. So if there's added lift here, it pulls the aircraft to the left. How do you solve this? Well, more right rudder. As you climb then, you need that right rudder. But when you level off, the P factor goes away. That's why when climbing, you need more right rudder. When in level cruise flight, less right rudder. But do know that you need right rudder on takeoff. And why? Because of P factor. Secondary reason why airplanes like to turn left, torque. All right, bring out a friendly model airplane guy here. As viewed from the cockpit, the prop turns clockwise. When it turns clockwise, it makes the fuselage turn to the left. That is called torque. And you're probably familiar with torque for other reasons. It goes back to Newton's third law. Every action, in this case clockwise, has an opposite equal reaction. This case, aircraft turns to the left. How do you fix this problem? Or right rudder. All right, slipstream, sometimes called prop wash. Back to our model. The air rotates around the fuselage in a clockwise direction. As the air slipstreams around the fuselage, it impacts the vertical stabilizer on the stabilizer left-hand side. It pushes the stabilizer to the right, making the nose of the aircraft go to the left. Slipstream or prop wash. How do you fix this problem? More right rudder, it goes away. You have to keep the right rudder in as necessary in order to keep the ball in the center where it should be. But trust me, if you don't push on that right rudder, your instructor will say to you the famous 3 words, more right rudder. Okay, 3 reasons why an aircraft likes to turn to the left. There's a 4th reason, gyroscopic precession. And this has to do with physics. You may understand physics better than me. But when you have a rotating force and you import or impact the force, the gyro wants to move in a perpendicular manner, not in the direction you asked it to move. That's called gyroscopic precession. And I happen to have a gyro with me today. This gyro was donated by Dan Atkins Cycle in Verona. Dan's a pilot. I said to him I want to demonstrate gyroscopic precession. He gave me this. He's a great bike shop if ever you're in Verona. So, a rotating disc, when asked to move, responds perpendicular to your request. I request up, it wants to go right. I request down, it wants to go left. We'll talk about this a little further, but this wheel weighs about 15 pounds. And when I fire it up, it goes about 200 RPMs. Not very fast, not very heavy. The propeller on a Skyhawk 172 weighs 76 pounds, and it rotates at 2,500 RPMs. So there's a very significant gyroscopic impact caused by the propeller. I'll say the gyroscopic is more significant when you have a tailwheel. As you rotate a tailwheel aircraft, the prop lowers, and when the prop lowers, the aircraft wants to go to the left every single time. So this is the fourth reason why aircraft like to turn to the left. Let's fire it up and I'll demonstrate the perpendicular action of the gyro. I wish you were here in person. You'd have a chance to fly the gyro in person. Oh, and by the way, when you're flight trained next, the gyro is in the instructor's office. Ask for it, and you can experience gyroscopic precession first person. All right, rotates clockwise as viewed from the cockpit. As I move it down, the gyro goes to the left. As I move it up, the gyro goes to the right. The action's perpendicular to the input. Here I go down, and the gyro goes to the left. Now to demonstrate that, when I go left, the gyro goes up. Just the way gyros work. There you go, the 4 reasons why airplanes like to turn left, and why you, as a pilot, need more right rudder. I'll tell you a quick story. There was a Cirrus pilot who was taking a check ride, not at Morey Field. It didn't happen here. And as they rolled down the runway, the aircraft, no surprise, started to go to the left. The Cirrus pilot did not respond with the right rudder. The examiner responded with right rudder. You never want the examiner to respond for safety reasons when on a check ride. So they abort the takeoff. They didn't damage any runway lights or propeller or airplane. But on the taxiway back to the office, the examiner said to the student pilot, "What happened?" And the student pilot said, "Well, the airplane went to the left." And the examiner said, "Why did it go to the left?" Student pilot was puzzled with the request that was asked. He said, I think it went to the left because of torque." The examiner says, "Well, that's a great answer. Well done. There's 3 more reasons why it went left. What are they?" And the student pilot was clueless, had no idea. And the examiner requested the student pilot return on a later date and time to take the check ride over again after he learned the 4 reasons why the Cirrus wanted to depart the runway in a left-hand direction rather than straight. So I don't want this to happen to you. Watch this video, review the video. When asked by your instructor or by your examiner, why does the airplane turn left? You have all the answers. I want you to have all the answers. This idea of more right rudder, it's not new. You may know a little bit about Morey Field. Howard Morey, the original Morey, started the airfield in 1934. On the day the field opened, his oldest son was born, and his son was named Field. And that's interesting because when else would Field Morey own and manage Morey Field? But that's another story. Field then, his son was born, Rich Morey, and Rich Morey is the Morey we know today. So the middle Morey, Field Morey, he said to his student pilot so many times, "More right rudder, more right rudder." And then a little bit later, "More right rudder." He said it so many times that he had a hat. He made a hat and he gave it to his students requesting more right rudder. And here's the hat. You'll see that it says Morey right rudder. And that's like my favorite hat. I encourage you to get one if you can. Otherwise, remember, more right rudder.
I've seen those hats around, but I never knew where they came from. Didn't realize there was a backstory.
Indeed, there is a backstory. I think you can buy them at Morey, at the Morey Airfield now. They're in the counter there by the other Morey hats.
That's fantastic.
And what a great last name, Morey, right rudder. That guy was born to be a pilot. Instructor, I mean, both actually. We are open for
Well,
questions, if there be any.
Yep. I think what we'll do is give people a couple minutes to ask any questions so I can read them off of the chat, either on YouTube or on Zoom. And then after Q&A, we'll go ahead and take about a 10-minute break. So if you have any questions, now's the time. I don't see any questions, but Sarah says, excellent lesson, Pete.
Oh, and I wanted to correct, the airfield opened in 1932, but I just told you it was 1934. My apologies. Only Scott was alive then, so he would be the only one to know. Sorry, Scott.
Thanks.
I say we break, and then any unanswered questions, we can pick them up when we come back.
All right, sounds good. Why don't we come back here? We'll give you a couple extra minutes since we're probably going to run a little short today. Why don't we come back here at 19:30?
We'll see you then. I heard that, Scott.
The camera adds 10 pounds.
At least. Scott, where's your, oh, there you are.
Yeah, the camera adds 10 pounds.
At least.
No, I really like this format. And I'm really enjoying your presentation. I always learn something every time. You know, it's very good. I really like how this is going.
So I put the camera on a tripod, in the normal training room there at Morey. Rich would come in and check on me from time to time to see if I maintained sanity. And I've heard that teachers who are teaching from home are challenged by the experience. And I know the talk show hosts are very challenged not having an audience.
Yes.
And now I know exactly how they feel.
Yes.
It's definitely bizarre.
The lack of interpersonal feedback and spontaneous questions is really, it's quite real. And, we have found that the lessons take shorter time because we don't have the questions. And the other time it just sort of gets lost in there. So, fortunately, we're a Part 61 school, so we don't have to have the 35 hours documented. So it's, no, it's very different.
I know when I was doing the weather briefing portion, it's like, I know what I'm looking for when I open that up, and I know why I like doing certain things when I'm selecting different options and that, but then all of a sudden, like trying to explain it to just my computer screen and not having any sort of feedback as to whether or not people are confused by what I'm doing or why, it was like, oh man, I feel like I'm just rambling on here.
Yeah, it's a challenge, it's a challenge.
Breezy, I shared some of my favorite internet links, but I'm not quite sure where they are or how a person might find them.
Yeah, so when I sent out the links for the Zoom meeting and the YouTube link, the last email that the students would have gotten from me,
Sure.
I included included a link to where I uploaded those onto the Google Drive, because we have a Google Drive that we're putting all of our documents on and all of our PowerPoints and things like that. So I included the links in a separate document for today's session. So those should be available on there either through Drive or in the email that was sent out.
That sounds fine. Are you connected with the Wisconsin DOT website for weather?
I am not. Travis, it's going to be under the 42820 Peter Arsvold folder.
So
there you go. Yep.
So everyone who's listening, I really encourage you to be connected to the DOT website weather. And the reason is because when you go to an airport, that's the weather you will find, at the FBO. And also, whether you're in Platteville or Boscobel, they always have those weather terminals in the what they call the flight planning area of the FBO. They have it at Madison, they have it at Milwaukee, they have it in Oshkosh and everywhere. So once you get familiar with that weather, which is provided by the Department of Transportation for free, it creates consistency, in your weather research.
And I don't see any more questions, so I think we can go ahead and start.
Welcome back. Next topic of discussion has to do with where is the wind and why does it matter? Keep in mind that during the taxi portion of your flight, you're close to the ground, and aircraft can be damaged when close to the ground. In fact, the risk when close to the ground is greater than the risk at 3,000 or 5,000 feet, because aircraft are damaged when near the ground. Sometimes you'll hit a light pole, sometimes a landing light, sometimes a taxiway light. On the ground, the vast majority of aircraft accidents happen on the ground. So even though you're on the ground, you still need to be careful, and you need to know where is the wind. So let's talk about that. The objective of the control inputs I'm about to share is to increase your safety while on the ground. There's a saying in aviation, when on the ground, you should climb into the wind. It's sort of poetic, climb into the wind. I like it. But also, dive away from the wind. And here's why. If the wind is coming from here, you want to have the ailerons to the left, and you want to pull the elevator to a neutral position. Climb into the wind. It reduces the likelihood that the wind will blow you onto your back. And that's hard to explain. You want to avoid it at all costs. Never have the wind blow you onto your back. If the wind's from here, then we're climbing into the wind, we would have ailerons neutral and the elevator back. It doesn't have to be up elevator, but it just has to be back elevator to neutral setting. Wind is from here. You're with me, I'm sure. Right aileron, elevator neutral, or climb. Keep in mind, if you just leave the elevator alone, it'll be in a down position because of gravity. You want to bring it up to a neutral position. In this instance, if the wind blows hard, your aircraft will want to fly into the wind. And that's good, because if you have the controls in the wrong position, unfortunately, you can end up on your back. That's when the wind is in front of the aircraft. When the wind is behind the aircraft, things change. We want to dive away from the wind. And this increases the likelihood that you'll have a safe taxi. Wind is from here, right aileron, and the yoke full forward. It will reduce the likelihood that you end up on your back. Here, wings neutral, ailerons neutral, stick full forward, or yoke full forward. In this position, I'll give you a moment, where would the controls be? It's important to dive away from the wind, so that would mean a left aileron input. And because the wind's at your back, your elevator should be full forward or down position. All right, so keep that in mind, climb into the wind, dive away from the wind. And this is a question that'll be asked of you by your instructor, and also a test question you'll find on your written test. When you have down elevator, and the wind is coming from behind, you'll see that the wind impacts the elevator, holding the tail down. That's a good thing, because when the wind is behind you, you want the tail to be down. If you made the mistake and had the tail elevator up, The wind can impact the elevator and nose you over. Nosing over is never a good thing. So, wind at your back, you want the elevator down or forward, and that's why. I don't have ailerons on this aircraft, or I would show you the reasons why you want to steer into the wind when it's in front of you and steer away when it's behind, but you'll have a chance to work through that with your instructor. That concludes our presentation regarding where's the wind, but also I want to say, what do you do now? The wind is perpendicular to the fuselage, 90 degrees. What do you do now? Here's my recommendation. I recommend that you aileron to the left and climb into the wind. Here's why. With wind coming from here, the aircraft can weather vane. And you probably have seen a weather vane on top of a barn or top of a pole shed or building. The weather vane always weather vanes into the wind. All right, so when it weather vanes, now it's in front of you and it's on the left-hand side. So I encourage you to climb into the wind, left aileron, up elevator. So this is a matter of being one step ahead. If you find a gust and if you weather vane, you are already there. Nothing needs to change. No movement needs to occur. And that's a concept in aviation that's important. I want you to understand. Always you want to be ahead of the airplane. If you have a flight on Sunday, you probably should be thinking about that flight on the Friday or Saturday before. What will the weather be like? What kind of flight planning do I need? Will the aircraft be fueled? Is the aircraft available? Am I on the rental schedule? Is my instructor available that day? Etc., etc. You want to be ahead of the airplane. Never ever should the airplane land before you land first. And so just like having the ailerons to the left and up elevator when the wind is perpendicular, I want you to be ahead of the airplane. At a more complicated airport, Madison for example, you want to have a taxiway diagram before you get to the airport. You want to have a taxiway diagram before you take off. Always be ahead of the airplane. If you can stay ahead of that aircraft, you're going to have greater success long term. The aircraft should never get to the airfield before you do. About where's the wind? Coming up next, we'll have a chat.
Very good.
I'm not seeing any questions over on YouTube, but I do want to say that we've got a friend that's abroad right now in Portugal teaching English, and he's kind of taking some like self-taught ground school lessons right now. And he was actually just this week asking us about this very topic, and your advice about staying one step ahead of the airplane and staying one step ahead of where the wind might be and anticipating that weather vane is actually really interesting. I had originally thought of keeping the ailerons neutral if you had a directly perpendicular wind, but I did not think of staying ahead of it like that. So I'll definitely be letting our friend know. So thank you for that. It's always interesting that I feel like I learned something from every one of these ground school sessions.
So Breezy, let me add to that just briefly.
Yeah, for sure.
When you're in your car and the car moves to the left, the instinct that you have is to steer right. And if you're on a bicycle and it goes left unexpectedly, your instinct is to turn right. And even when you were young, 2 years or 3 years old, on the tricycle, where your first wheeled transportation, if the tricycle was going left, you correct to the right. So every instinct in your body suggests when the aircraft moves to the left that you should aileron to the right. However, that is a wrong thing to do in an airplane. Because if you do get a gust from the left-hand side, enough to weather vane the aircraft, and you steer right, you've done everything wrong. And that's why I like having the ailerons left in advance. That way, if I should weather vane, I don't need to respond. I'm already where I need to be. That's why I like left better than neutral.
Yeah, it makes a whole heck of a lot of sense to me too.
Hearing no further questions, I suggest we move forward.
Yep, I don't see any, so let's go ahead.
Welcome back. Maybe notice these segments are getting a little bit shorter and shorter. It's a sign that we're getting more near the end. Thanks again for listening. So where is the wind? Obviously, this is an important question. The wind impacts everything we do in aviation. Birds take off into the wind. They simply must. They just have little feet. And if they take off with the wind at their back, they just can't. They always take off into the wind. And we as pilots should learn from the birds. Birds have been around longer than we have. They know take off into the wind. We know take off into the wind. And here's why. When you have a 10-knot headwind, it decreases the distance required for takeoff. It decreases the distance required by about 10%. Not a big deal. 10%, not a big deal. But if you're not paying attention and you take off with that 10-knot tailwind by mistake, it increases your takeoff distance by 45%. So you get a 10% bonus by taking off into the wind, and you get a 45% penalty for taking off with the wind at your back. It's always good taking off with less ground speed than more. The wheels on an aircraft are small. They like 50 or 60 much better than a tailwind where your wheel speed might be 70 or 80 miles per hour from a ground speed perspective. So always take off into the wind. Why do airports have more than one runway? Well, you might say because they're busy. Well, that can be a factor, but the real factor is aircraft like to take off into the wind. And this happens at Morey Field, it happens at Chicago Midway, it happens at Sauk Prairie. Oh, I take that back. Sauk Prairie only has one runway. Pilots need to take off into the wind. Again, you get a 10% bonus if you take off into the wind, and you get a 45% penalty if you take off with the wind at your back. And that wind is only 10 knots. Imagine if the wind would be greater, the penalty would be greater. So when asked the question, why more than one runway? It's because aircraft like to take off into the wind. So when you wake up in the morning, you might listen to the news. They'll give you a weather report. The weatherman, weather person will say, winds are from the west. And so you know that. And so when you get to the airport, you're likely to take off on runway 28 here at Morey Field, Middleton. Think about it before you get here. But there are ways to know where the wind is, not including the weather report. My last ground school, I asked students, where's the wind? And they were a pretty bright group. And these are the answers they provided. How do you know where is the wind? First student said, use the windsock. Hey, good idea. That must have a windsock for a reason. Did you know the windsock is calibrated at most airports? If it's kind of out but not really, that might be a 5-knot wind. If it's about 50% out, that could be a 10-knot wind. If the windsock is straight out, it's indication that your wind is more than 15 knots. If the wind is down the runway, that might be an okay day to fly, but if you have a crosswind and 15 knots, I recommend you fly with your instructor, or else just wait for a better day. Another way to know where is the wind, AWOS. AWOS will tell you where the wind is. AWOS is updated continuously. ATIS, which is the weather that happens at Madison, Class Charlie Airport, and Bravo. ATIS is updated every hour. Automated Terminal Information Systems. ATIS comes hourly. AWOS is continuous. When I say continuous, I think it updates as often as every minute. That's the difference between AWOS and ATIS. Where's the wind? All right, you're flying over a farm field. You can see the wind on the waves of grain. And I think it's maybe in the national anthem, amber waves of grain. You can see the waves. Another answer. I like this one, patriotic. Where's the wind? You can watch flags. Flags on a stadium, flags on a flagpole, flags nearby the airport, like at Sauk Prairie, there's a big old flag on the southeast corner of the airstrip. Even if you don't see the windsock, you can always see the flag. When flying over water, you can see the wind because of waves on the water. Interesting little side note. If you see whitecaps, it means the wind is blowing 15 knots or more. Without whitecaps, 15 knots or less. So you can watch the waves on a nearby lake. Incidentally, if you were to land on the lake, not recommended except if you have floats, but if you were to use the lake as a guide for where's the wind, you would want to land towards the calm portion of the lake. Land towards calm, because the calm side of the lake is the direction from which the wind is blowing. Here's one that's common, smokestacks. Where's the wind? Well, there's a smokestack, there's a brush fire, there's a ethanol plant, and you can see the direction of the wind by the smokestacks. Up at Sauk Prairie, there's this triangular shaped wind indicator. It's called a tetrahedron. And the pointy part of the tetrahedron points into the wind. Because we live in Wisconsin, I call that the big cheese, the tetrahedron. Back on the water side, if a sailboat is moored, not moving, and the sails are down, they moor on the bow of the sailboat. So if you have an airport near a lake, you can watch the direction of the moored sailboats, and that will help you know the direction of the wind. Just north of the field here at Morey, we have wind turbines. When they're moving, they point into the wind, always. And the wind turbines provide a nice indicator, where is the wind? One of my students said, clouds. Clouds can tell you where the wind is. Well, not the clouds themselves, because you're moving through space, the clouds are moving through space. Clouds really don't work, except cloud shadows can tell you where is the wind. Watch the cloud shadow. If the shadow moves north to south, you should be landing towards the north. This is a good one. When you line up to land on runway 28, if the aircraft is being pushed to the south, you know the wind is from the north, and vice versa. So where's the wind? You should know where the wind is without any other information, simply by determining the drift of your aircraft. So where's the wind? It must be from the north, as my aircraft is being pushed to the south. Hot air balloons are an indication where's the wind. If you see balloons moving north to south, you should be landing in a northerly direction. Weather vanes, we talked about weather vanes before. If you see a weather vane, use that as an indication where's the wind. Kites, you might fly over Wall Diamond or Park, and the kites will obviously indicate to you where is the wind. Debris can indicate where's the wind. It can be a little hard to see from the air, but if you see blowing debris, you want to land into the wind. Sometimes on football Saturdays in the fall, we have the Goodyear blimp parked out here at Morey Field. They moor it on the bow of the blimp. And interestingly, they have wheels that enable the blimp to rotate 360, pardon me, 360 degrees. A perfect indication where's the wind, and it's big too. So all these are ways to know where's the wind. And what I tend to ask my students and pilots I fly with, almost every landing, I'll say, Sarah, where is the wind? Sarah will say, it's from the right-hand side. And I'll say, yes, you're right. But sometimes Sarah will give me the wrong answer. And I think that happens because she wasn't one step ahead of the airplane. Obviously, if the wind's from the right, you need to fly in a manner that enables the aircraft to arrive safely on the runway. The manner of flight is different than if the wind's from the left. And even as important as left and right, you never want to land with a tailwind. Tailwind makes every runway short. You always want to land with a headwind. And so I apologize that you didn't get a chance to answer those questions. Where's the wind? But no, it's very important. Know that every day you fly, you should know where is the wind. And you should be able to calculate the wind component. So there's a chart. You'll find it in your textbook, in the Jeppesen textbook. You'll find it online. It's called a crosswind component calculator, crosswind component chart. And as I talk about the wind, imagine the wind is blowing 15. It's straight down the runway. You can fly with the wind 15 straight down the runway. I have no concerns that you would be safe. But if the wind is perpendicular to the runway, that creates a crosswind component of 15. A 15 crosswind is significant. Unless you were experienced and unless you had proven yourself as being qualified to land in a 15 knot direct crosswind, I would encourage you to skip flying that day and come back the next. So understand how to calculate crosswind component. And there's a chart, you'll find it in the Jeppesen Guided Flight Discovery book. It will help you determine the crosswind component, and that's what matters. You know, velocity matters, direction matters, but it's the combination of velocity and direction that matters most. That concludes our discussion of where is the wind. Again, as always, don't hesitate to send me questions. I look forward to answering your inquiries.
Does anyone else have any other ideas for where you might be able to find the wind when you're in the airplane? It was a pretty comprehensive list there, so.
In fact, there was one somewhat obvious that was missed. and that is dust. Like if you're flying over Wisconsin, almost anywhere, you'll find tractors or farm equipment and pickup trucks on a dirt road. Truck dust is a obvious indicator where is the wind. And then offline sometime, feel free to ask me about cows because they too are wind. They too are wind indicators. Just realizing that this might be replayed more than once, I felt uncomfortable including cows in the discussion.
That's the best part of the discussion, though. Come on. Sarah's saying so too.
Well, for those of you who haven't heard the story before, cows have been around a long time. I mean, they just didn't appear on Earth, 10 years ago or 100 years ago. They've been around a long, long time. And during a period of their life cycle, they were at risk of being eaten by wolves and bears and other predatory animals. So the cows developed a very fine sense of smell. And cows also can see very well. If the cow would have their face into the wind, predatory creatures could sneak up behind them and eat them for lunch. And so cows learned over the passage of thousands and thousands of years that they should look downwind to see predatory creatures wanting to eat them for lunch. And because of their fine sense of smell, they could smell the wolf or the bear from the upwind position. So by grazing tail into the wind, they're able to protect themselves by their sense of smell and by their eyesight. Having said that, then, if you find cows grazing in a field and you happen to be without an engine, wanting to land in the same field as the cows, it's important for the cows to see you coming, because in that regard, you will be landing into the wind. Now, I've been told the same thing applies to horses, but I haven't personally witnessed horses tail into the wind, but I do know cows will graze tail into the wind.
That was going to be my contribution tonight, Pete. I was doing some research online during your presentation. And in fact, the AOPA has an article on just that type of thing. And you're right, the cows point downwind, but horses, they say, tend to point their nose into the wind in the opposite direction.
Interesting. So what would protect the horses from being eaten?
What eats horses?
Well, probably not wolves, because the horses are too fast.
It's a good question. I don't know why that would be. They didn't give a reason for it.
Well, there you go. I learned something new. That is, when landing in a farm field filled with horses, you should be pointing the same direction the horses are pointing. And good luck with that.
I think this is my favorite part of your presentation every single time I see it, is this conversation right here.
Well, Breezy, for your sake, I'm glad we didn't miss the best parts.
I don't think I was going to let you miss that. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I do think that we can head on to the next video too.
All right, here by all means, by all measures, the shortest segment of tonight's presentation. This is my weather section. In what direction does high pressure rotate? And I've asked many students this question, even pilots this question. What direction does high pressure rotate? And the answer is very simple. High pressure rotates clockwise. Where on the wall would you find a clock? Ordinarily, fairly high up. High up, clockwise. You'll never need to think about the answer again as long as you live. High pressure rotates clockwise, low pressure counterclockwise. There's another part of this. Air moves towards low pressure. Remember the vacuum, low pressure, and the dirt moves towards it. The wing, low pressure, and the wing moves towards it. Weather moves towards low pressure. I have an interesting demonstration I'll show you in a moment. Air moves towards low pressure. Stand by. I'll be right back. Welcome back. If you haven't noticed already, I like to demonstrate all things. Aircraft, propellers, wings, and now you're going to get a short demonstration how we're all surrounded by pressure and how pressure moves towards low pressure. It's not rocket science, think about it. Pressure moves towards low pressure. Just like dirt moves towards low pressure, pressure moves towards low pressure. An example of that would be a hurricane where you have a low pressure center and weather from all around gets pulled into the center of the hurricane. Another example would be the fact that we're surrounded by pressure from the stratosphere on down. It's pressing against us every moment of every day. You can measure it. A standard day shows 29.92 inches of mercury. That's the result of pressure. All right, so I'm going to introduce to this bag low pressure, and the pressure around me will fill the bag. My lung capacity isn't 6 feet in volume like what we have with this diaper bag in front of me. The diaper bags, by the way, are available through Playtex. You can find them online in case you want to try this at home by yourself. So I'm going to create a little low pressure, and the pressure around me is going to fill the bag, and you'll have a never before seen example how pressure moves towards low pressure, assuming this works. Here we go. Aha! 3 little spurts of low pressure, and the bag is filled. Not with my lungs, but with the pressure all around us. How about that?
So for anyone interested, Playtex sells the diaper bags, and they come in 100-foot sections. I think the idea is to put in a diaper and tear off the bag, and put in another diaper and tear off the bag. Anyway, so I have lots of diaper bag material left, and since I haven't any grandkids, I have a supply of this if anybody should be looking for excess diaper bag supply. I found it interesting that, and I saw this like Bill Nye, the science guy. I found it interesting that the pressure surrounding us, 29.92 inches of mercury, we take it for granted. We don't really notice it, except it is there. It starts in the stratosphere and presses down all the way to sea level. The one thing I didn't note in the presentation is that high pressure improves the aircraft's performance. That's why aircraft performance at sea level is better than aircraft performance at 5,000 feet or 10,000 feet. I just found it interesting that a low pressure at the opening of the garbage, or in this case, diaper bag, enabled the air around me to fill the bag. I just never really thought of it before, and now you've seen it for the very first time. Anything more than that is just dangerous.
That was a good demo. So I gotta ask, did you buy a pack of diaper bags just for that demo?
Well, I did. It was like $7 on Amazon Prime, free delivery. And someday,
That's fantastic.
and someday I might have grandchildren, and I'll be prepared. I'll be ready.
I guess so.
I suggest we move
All
on.
right. Yep, not seeing any questions. Let's go.
Hello and welcome back. So after this, I have one more demonstration and we're done. So hang in there, we're almost finished. Wake turbulence, what is it? How do we prevent it? This is important, not so important here at Morey Field, but if you head over to Madison, you might find yourself flying behind an Airbus 320, and that's when it's important to know what is wake turbulence. As we follow the Airbus 320 in front of us, know that the wake turbulence rolls off the wingtips. It moves from high pressure to low pressure. Gosh, there we are talking about pressure once again. On the left wingtip, it rotates clockwise. It descends below the height of the aircraft in front of you and outward, like a wake might move outward if behind a ski boat on the lake. The wake turbulence on the right side moves from high to low, so the wake turbulence on the right side moves in a counterclockwise direction. It moves away and it descends. You don't want to find yourself in that wake. It's powerful. It's like a tornado, horizontal tornado. It can, if you're caught in it, it can roll you. And even though you're fighting back, you might find yourself inverted. Not recommended. The Cessna 172 is not designed to fly upside down. If you would find yourself in this very uncomfortable position, you want to continue to roll with the direction you're in. If you could fight it, you wouldn't be upside down. Also, if inverted, you want to push forward on the yoke. Pulling back has very serious consequences. When upside down, push forward on the yoke, roll with it, and hopefully, you survived without a scratch. Rather than fly upside down, let's talk about ways to prevent it. Prevention is better than flying upside down. Madison says, 75706, clear to land runway 36, caution, wake turbulence. That's the heads up that you need to be careful. That's the heads up that you need to avoid wake turbulence. One way to avoid it, passage of time. You can say to Madison, unable due to wake turbulence. Unable is the key word. They'll give you other instructions. They might have you land on runway 32 instead of runway 36. Landing on 32, the caution wake turbulence is no longer a factor. You could ask for delay. You could say, Madison Tower 706, unable. Request delay due to wake turbulence. And they'll most often grant you that request for delay. They might have you fly 360. They might have you fly downwind, base and final, creating delay. But remember, you're responsible for safety. They're not. And you need to do what you can to avoid wake turbulence. The third way to avoid wake turbulence is to land beyond the heavy that landed in front of you. Keep in mind that wake turbulence only occurs when lift is being generated. If the heavy has landed and is no longer generating lift, you can land beyond where the heavy touched down, significantly reducing the risk for wake turbulence. Where did the heavy land? I didn't see the heavy. Well, they almost always land in the same spot, time after time after time. They fly an ILS approach, brings them down to the same spot, and the spot where they land is marked by tire marks. You want to land beyond the tire marks. By landing beyond the tire marks, your risk associated with wake turbulence is significantly diminished. All right, so what if you're taking off behind the Airbus 320? You want to watch where he breaks ground, because when he breaks ground, he's generating lift. Lift generates wake turbulence. You're in a small plane. You accelerate faster than he does. Lift off before his liftoff point and fly above his flight path, and your opportunity for risk associated with wake turbulence is significantly reduced. All right, so we know what wake turbulence is. We know how to avoid it. But when is wake turbulence bad? When is it the worst? And this is a written test question. It often is answered incorrectly, but not by you, because you attended class this evening. Wake turbulence is worst when the aircraft in front of you is heavy or light. Well, no surprise. Heavy creates added risk from a wake turbulence perspective. Wake turbulence is worse when the aircraft in front of you is fast or when they're moving slow. When moving slow, they're generating all kinds of lift in a fairly short distance. Moving fast, I think the lift is the same, but it's spread out maybe over a mile or two. So when the heavy's moving slow, which is typical for landing and for takeoff, it's more dangerous. A slow heavy is more dangerous from a wake turbulence perspective than a fast heavy. All right, those two seem fairly obvious. The one that's less obvious is the last one. Keep in mind this, wake turbulence is uninterrupted and powerful and strong when the flaps are clean. Uninterrupted, powerful, and strong when the flaps are clean. When the heavy extends the flaps, it creates added turbulence, but it deducts from the wake turbulence. It gets in the way. It breaks up the wake turbulence. And so, many people get this wrong, but wake turbulence is worse when an aircraft in front of you is clean, because their wake turbulence is uninterrupted. It's powerful. That's one that is often missed. You won't miss it because you attended class tonight. Clean is when the wake turbulence is the worst. All right, so in summary, wake turbulence descends below the aircraft in front of you. You can avoid wake turbulence by requesting the passage of time, requesting a different runway, or by landing beyond the heavy who landed before you. Again, like I mentioned before, email me, call me, ask me any questions. Respect wake turbulence. it should not be a factor in your life, as long as you understand it and as long as you take appropriate caution.
It looks like George has or is finding a video on wake turbulence, and he's posting the link to the YouTube chat, it looks like. I can make sure that we get that onto the useful links page too, and into the Zoom chat. It actually sounds like we have a
we go.
video that Travis found too.
This is an excellent video on a plane crash that occurred in Europe a few years ago that was caused by a plane that didn't appear to be that heavy, but it was heavy enough to turn this plane on its back and crash.
That's the link that that you're posting, George? Or are you sharing your screen?
Yeah, I'm posting it on the both the Zoom and the YouTube here in just a second.
Oh, cool. Sounds good. Travis has a short video, it looks like. Oh, that's demoing the wingtip vortices. Very cool.
Very graphic evidence of the vortices.
We do have a request to review when to fly above or below the flight path. I'm going to try that again. Flight path, if applicable, to avoid wake turbulence. Wow, that was really hard to say.
I'm not aware of any instance where flying below the flight path is recommended. Always above the flight path. Because the wake turbulence descends, I see no reason why you'd want to fly below the flight path.
George, this is Sarah. I was not able to post any links to the live YouTube chat a couple weeks ago when I tried to do the same thing, but it looks like you posted it to the Zoom. So I guess for those on YouTube, we'll probably just try to get that to you some other way.
I copied and pasted the plain text onto the YouTube chat. However, I can definitely post that onto the useful links page, and I can also post the video that Travis just played too. Karen, did that answer your question? All right, awesome. I think if no one else has any other questions, we are ready to move on too.
Hi, I'm back. Thanks for hanging here with me. This idea of survival is our closing chapter for tonight. And I so appreciate your time and energy up to this point. Will to survive. Will to survive is vital. If you find yourself in a difficult situation, your will to survive is vital. And quite frankly, life-saving. But it is important to have an idea what's more important when making an effort to survive. I attended a survival training camp in Oklahoma City. It is still available today. You can call down and make arrangements. You can go there. You can do wilderness survival kinds of things. You can find yourself in a life raft. You can find yourself being lifted from that life raft by a helicopter. Oh wait, it's not a helicopter. Actually, it's a winch on top of the swimming pool. They put you in a cockpit and turn you upside down underwater, and they teach you how to escape from a cockpit underwater. It's pretty interesting. They teach you how to gather water using a solar collector. They show you how to signal for aircraft to find you in the event you are in an area where they end up searching for you. But I encourage you to do that. I'll include an article in some of the information for this presentation. You can read it. It's kind of fun. They teach you vertigo, and also they take you up to 25,000 feet in an altitude chamber, and they turn off the oxygen. It's quite interesting to see how you respond. And all of the things I just described, they're free, although you do need to get down to Oklahoma City. And with the virus going on, I suspect that training has been suspended for the time being. About priorities. You can only survive without air for about 30 minutes. So that's a top priority. In the cold winter of Wisconsin, you can only survive about 3 hours without shelter. So as you think about it, a survival pack, shelter is key. I recommend in the wintertime that you fly with a blanket at the very least, or fly with a sleeping bag. So when you land in a farm field without a scratch, you can snuggle into that sleeping bag and wait for help to find you. Unless you're close to civilization, unless you can see the farmhouse from where you're resting, it's generally recommended to stay with the aircraft. Aircraft's big, easy to find, has ELT. We'll be looking for you anyway. Stay with the aircraft. You tend to have better luck with the aircraft. It's a big target. Rest. I found this one interesting. You need rest to survive. After about 30 hours without rest, you start to lose the ability to think cognitively. You begin to make decisions which you would never make if you were well rested. So rest, about 30 hours. Here's another one, water. You know, if you pack a survival kit, pack some water. I was surprised, but after 3 days without water, you're at a high risk of fatal results. Water is important, very important. And then food. You know, if I was to pack a survival kit, I'd probably pack food. And, you know, I'd probably eat it, as you can see. But you can go 30 days without food. That's remarkable. So, to make the long story short, pack water and leave the food behind. One thing they said in Oklahoma City is, don't ever eat unless you have water, because eating dehydrates your body, making your dehydration worse. If you have water, it's safe to eat, but don't eat without water. So this will to survive, the priorities. I do recommend in the wintertime that you fly with hat and gloves. I recommend that you fly with wind-proof matches so you could start a fire for heat. And also, a nice fire makes it easier to find you if you're in a farm field somewhere. You know, I recommend blankets, hats, gloves. And don't just bring a blanket for yourself, but bring a blanket for your guests as well. My recommendation in the wintertime in Wisconsin is take enough gear with you that you could survive one night without heat out in a farm field somewhere. And you might wonder, well, why would I stay in the farm field? You might have a fractured ankle. That fractured ankle would keep you from moving. Again, it's better to stay with the airplane in most cases, but have enough cold weather equipment to last one night. And if you do, the chances are very significant that you'll be found the next day. But if you have enough cold weather attire to last one night, you probably have enough cold weather attire to last two. But you need to survive night one. Regarding the will to survive, it's vital. I have a short story here I'll share with you that demonstrates how vital will to survive is. And I'll tell you in advance, it's kind of dark where we're going, but I only share it with you because I want you to be that survivor in the event you ever find yourself in a difficult position. This happened in July 1985. Stranded without food or water on a vast stretch of the Arizona desert, a man traveled for 8 days, covering a distance of 150 miles. And he traveled during the day in a desert. Not recommended. Travel at night when in a desert. Temperatures during the day rose as high as 120 degrees. Lack of water caused him to lose 25% of his body weight because of dehydration. 10% is usually fatal. The lacerations he suffered did not bleed because he had no liquid in his system. He did nothing right. He had no survival training. Yet the one thing this man did is he had a strong will to survive. And he did survive because of sheer willpower. In contrast, on the next page, and this survival manual came to me from Oklahoma City. It's a FAA publication. In contrast, a pilot ran into engine trouble and chose to dead stick land his plane rather than eject. The aircraft came to rest on a frozen lake with little or no damage. After examining the aircraft for damage and assessing the area, he noted a wooded shoreline that would provide decent shelter. Approximately halfway to the shoreline, he decided to return to the aircraft. After re-entering the aircraft, he lit a cigar. He smoked a small portion. He then pulled out his service revolver and delivered a fatal shot to his head. Amazingly, less than 24 hours later, a rescue team located him in his aircraft without apparent will to survive. Very sad. Keep in mind, if you're in jeopardy, a strong will to survive, vital. And to conclude this chapter of wilderness survival, we're going to light fire in a way you probably haven't seen, and that will conclude tonight's activities. All right, this fire starting trick I learned in Oklahoma City. I'm pleased to show you how it works. Be careful that your children do not attempt this at home, as a result could be very dangerous. But I want you to see that with a little steel wool, some cotton, and a battery, you can make fire. And it only takes a matter of moments. You might have steel wool in the airplane. If not, I recommend you put some there in a safe spot, in a Ziploc to keep it dry and brittle. Cotton. The shirt you're wearing is likely made of cotton. There could be cotton in the clothing that you brought for the overnight stay potential. Your t-shirt is likely made of cotton. I think you can find some cotton somewhere and you'll be in success. The last item is the battery. Your cell phone has a battery. The airplane has a battery. Even your ELT has a battery. So the battery's not hard to find. What you do then is you take the cotton and you make it thin, almost so you could see through it, as follows. And you take the steel wool and you make it thin, almost like you can see through it, as follows. These three items together will make a great fire in just a matter of moments. We'll head out to the hangar where I have some tin for fire safety reasons. And in the hangar, we will make fire. Be right back. All right then, the final act, lighting fire. As you might guess, fire is vital for survival. And that's why I recommend you carry windproof matches in your little survival kit. Your survival kit doesn't need to weigh more than 1 pound. Windproof matches, Mylar, sleeping bag, water, life is good. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the steel wool and we're gonna put it on this tin for reasons of safety. That comes first. I apologize, it's a little hard to see. And then we're gonna put the cotton on top. As follows, cotton on top. And then I'm just going to touch the steel wool to the contacts on this 9-volt battery. And I'm gonna add oxygen and we're gonna have fire. That fire will keep us warm. That fire will help us have rabbit stew for dinner. That fire will help us be found by rescuers who are looking for us. So if you don't have windproof matches, but you have a battery, a little steel wool, if you feel like MacGyver, give this a try. Here it goes. Voila, as simple as that. We're having rabbit stew for dinner. That concludes this evening's event. Thank you so much for watching. Look forward to seeing you at the airport. Look forward to flying with you if the opportunity permits. Be safe, stay well. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, it's not obvious, but there's an encore presentation. 5 minutes left. And I talk about the importance of going around. Any questions about survival and the key priorities that always come in threes? 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days. The Oklahoma City event was really great fun, and it's free, and they still do offer it. In the written information I provided, a copy of which is out on the share drive, there's a link that talks about the Oklahoma experience. Also there's a link that talks about the program as it stands today, in case you would want to sign up and go down there. The one thing I didn't mention is they work with you and they have you demonstrate the impact of vertigo. And for the instrument pilots in our group, we've all experienced vertigo of one kind or another, but it can be pretty disabling. They actually have you experience it first person. And I know when I was in the cockpit and they were demonstrating vertigo, they had the cockpit rotating around me. I mean, I'm in the seat buckled in, but they had the cockpit rotating on these very fine bearings, so you can't feel the rotation. And then they stopped the rotation that I didn't know was there, and I would have fallen out of my seat if not for the seatbelts I was wearing. Vertigo is really something, and that's the one thing I didn't mention about being in Oklahoma City. The vertigo training was quite revealing. But before we go on to the final encore segment of 5 minutes, any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions yet, but one thing I do want to add to that is I don't know if they're doing it anymore or if it was just not there last year, but in the FAA building up at AirVenture, they actually have the hypoxia chamber too. And Travis and I did that one, and that's an eye-opening experience. I forget how high they bring you up theoretically, but essentially they're cutting the oxygen in the room, and they're having you do things like math problems and like weight and balance problems, or even just something as simple as looking at different colors. And that was a bizarre experience because I didn't realize that I had complete tunnel vision and had like lost all of my color vision until I had the oxygen back. Yeah, here we go. Here's a really good image of it. Until I had the oxygen mask on and was breathing O2 again. You kind of see the color wheel in the background there. That was completely gray to me, and I didn't actually recognize that at the time. And we were only in there for 5 minutes. So Oklahoma City has some pretty amazing things, and this is one of the things that they offer there full time. But once in a while, you'll see it up at Oshkosh. So if you're up there, and I think all you needed was a third-class medical in order to be able to experience that. But there's some pretty good demos out there. And let me tell you, I'd rather experience those on the ground than while I'm in the air.
Breezy, the photograph that I just witnessed, I think that was you in the chamber. That very same exact chamber is the one they use in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
And,
do they move the entire chamber?
Well, it's probably disassembled and reassembled, or maybe they have a traveling chamber. But it's the very same, it's glass walls, and they turn off the oxygen, and then they see what happens next. But what I found odd is you think you're aware of your surroundings and you think you know what you're doing, but later when you watch the video of your actions, you often don't remember what you were doing, and you often were very unaware of your surroundings. What surprised me is there wasn't any increase in heart rate, and no real cause for concern. It was just one moment you're there conscious, and the next moment you're unconscious, without any real warning or without any real advance concern.
Yeah.
I wonder, in a hijack situation, I've often wondered why the captain simply doesn't turn off the oxygen, because everyone would be unconscious except the pilot and co-pilot, because they have supplemental oxygen. Then you wander back and you take the guns away from the bad guys, and then you turn on the oxygen, and I think all would be well, except maybe with seniors or maybe with children, maybe the period without oxygen would be too long, and maybe some people wouldn't come back. There must be a reason why they don't do that in a hijack situation, because I don't think a hijacker would be able to carry supplemental oxygen onto the flight deck without being noticed. But I've never heard of that being done, but I sometimes wonder, why that wouldn't be effective.
That's a good point. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I do think that we can go on to the next segment. If anyone is I did a little bit of hiking on the Ice Age Trail, so I have a bunch of super ultra lightweight like supplies and everything. If anyone is interested in putting together an emergency bag, I might be able to help you out with some ideas on things too. So if that does sound like something that you'd like, I can send a list out later on. But I think right now we can go ahead and move on to the next video. Oh, Travis was showing all of the things that are available at Oklahoma City.
In the links that I provided, there is the FAA Survival Handbook, the one I referenced, the one in which a story was read from. That's included in the links near the bottom of those links.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
There it is. It's the same exact publication that we used when we were at Oklahoma City.
Thank you for sharing all those.
Yeah, they're ones I become my favorites, and I found them over a period of months or probably years, and so I want the students to have them now so they don't have to kind of stumble onto them in the same way that I did.
Makes sense. All right, I think we're ready for the last little bit here.
Good morning, Morey Ground School students. I had a chance this morning to fly the J3 Cub behind me. It is new in 1946. It was restored to museum-like fashion by Corey and Ryan Johnson. 3 years ago at Oshkosh, it won Best Restoration of the entire show. It's just beautiful. It has in front, it has a 65 horse Continental 4-stroke. And as you maybe guessed, it requires to be started by hand propped, or however you might say that. It adds to the nostalgia of the aircraft. Flies beautifully. But that's not why we're here. Why we're here is I was reviewing the prior clips that I made for you. I realized I forgot a very important topic. This important topic is the go-around. As you approach and the landing looks a little bit in doubt, you're encouraged to do a go-around. Full power, positive rate of climb, lose the flaps as appropriate, climb VY. Your instructor will work with you to make you confident and capable regarding the go-around maneuver. Also, when you take your check ride, the examiner will ask you to do the go-around maneuver. It's important that you practice it. It's important that you be good at it. I'm confident it will be one of your best maneuvers. But the reason I'm talking about it at all is I want you to use the go-around. It's very important. If you're high, go around. If you're low, go around. If you're fast, go around. If you're slow, go around. Anytime half the runway is behind you, by all means, you've got to go around. You should always land in the first third. You might have a cockpit distraction. Maybe your son or daughter has unbuckled their seatbelt. Please go around. There might be a bee in the cockpit causing distraction. Please go around. There might be a lawnmower on the runway. Go around. There might be another airplane who pulled out unexpectedly. Guess what? Go around. Of the topics we discussed in this ground school effort, perhaps the most important is the go around. Please, I want you to go around. When you go around, there's no paperwork to be filled out. You don't have to explain to the FAA that you broke an airplane. You don't have to explain to your spouse that you broke an airplane. You don't have to explain to Mr. Morey that you broke an airplane. And your insurance company too, they care. A simple go around only takes moments. I expect the next time around, the uncertainties you had before will have vanished. that you'll be better prepared for the crosswind, better prepared for the field conditions. Your airspeed will be better, your altitude will be better, all things will be better. So why not? Be brave, go around. It's really important. I'll share with you just a short story. Last summer I was giving biplane rides at a grass strip near Verona, Wisconsin. And it was a class reunion, and the classmates of the airport owner, they were getting rides. 9 rides, everyone perfect. Of course they're perfect because I'm a pilot. Ride number 10, it didn't feel right. I was high on final. I didn't know about the outcome. The first 9, they were fine, but this one, I didn't know about the outcome. So I did the right thing. I did a go around. And my passenger loved it. She thought, oh gosh, I get to fly twice with Pete, not just once. And the spectators on the ground, they loved it too. They thought, wow, look, a flyby. I wish Pete had taken me on a flyby. What they didn't know is that I had uncertainty in my heart that this landing number 10 was going to be a success or possibly a failure. The aircraft might have ended up on its back. The aircraft might have gone off the end of the runway. Almost any number of things might have happened. Go around. And I did. And so as I lined up for landing 10, my second try, the issues that were causing me grief on my first landing all seemed to vanish. The wind seemed perfect. My altitude seemed perfect. My alignment with the runway seemed perfect. And we touched down, great success. All 10 guests who went for a ride that day had fun. They went out for dinner after. I know they talked about the flight, and it was all very positive. Remember, going around is a positive thing. Be good at it. Do it. Be safe. Thank you very much.
All right, that's it. We made it.
We actually stretched it out to just about the full amount of time too. People had some really good questions.
You'll see my contact information there. In the morning or in the middle of the night, maybe a question will come to mind. By all means, ask. And when I see you at the airport, please be comfortable asking, and ask Rich Morey, and ask George, ask Sarah, ask Travis, ask anyone, Sarah too. We're happy to answer questions, and by, you know, if you're inquisitive, you'll be a better pilot. Try not to take things for granted. There's usually a reason for almost everything we do, and those reasons are often safety oriented. Sometimes they're oriented because of regulation, sometimes because of habit. But by all means, ask, and we'll be pleased to help you with those answers. And you maybe have heard it said, it takes a community to raise a child, and I think it takes a community of pilots to raise new pilots to the rank of a private pilot. And it's a very special rank, one that you can be proud of, and one that you will hold for the rest of your life.
Oh, is that you? Oh, okay. I wrote that one.
Well, thank you very much, Pete. I always enjoy your presentation, and it's definitely one that stands out. I would have to say that lighting fire with steel wool is an experience that we all missed out on, but you can definitely try at home as long as you do so safely. It's very fun. It works surprisingly well. I did add Pete's information onto the Google Drive. It's under the folder for today, and that there's a document in there that also includes all the links that he's talked about, and we've also updated the useful links page, the normal page, with some of those wingtip vortice YouTube links.
And the gyro is there in the instructor's office. If anybody wants to fly the gyro, you are always welcome. And look forward to seeing you at the airport, and wish for everyone the best of success in aviation and regarding the virus. Stay well, and I sincerely hope you never have a chance to meet that virus face to face.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions, but I'm seeing lots of praise and lots of thank yous. So thank you very much, Pete, on behalf of everyone. Great presentation, and it looks like you put a lot of work into these videos. So thank you very much.
Glad to help out. And again, it takes a community of pilots to raise a new pilot. And it's one of the things I do that I enjoy the very most. Thanks for being here tonight, and we will see you at the airport.
Excellent. Stay safe, everyone, and have a good night.